Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Dan Gay, Chief Marketing Officer of BlockSearch Blockchain, and we're coming to you live with the world from here. So great to have everybody here from around the globe, and we're joined here with my partner, Mr. Tim Vasco, who is the founder and just about everything here at BlockSearch. So good morning there, Tim.
Yeah, Chief Everything Officer.
Chief Everything. Well, especially this week, you've been Chief Everything Officer, it seems like.
Well, it's been an interesting week. It's a super exciting week, Dan, and year 2023, the year of the rabbit. Happy Lunar New Year, Chinese New Year, Kung Hei Fat Choi, in my wife's dialect, and Gong Si Fa Sai in Mandarin. So there you go.
Quite impressive, Tim.
Well, for you, because you can't hammer me on how bad my accent is.
That's right. But maybe your family would, right?
Definitely. They're like, don't even try. But
yeah.
Hey, Happy New Year. It's exciting. We have so much to talk about with Web 4.0 now and what's going on and our Lunar New Year and to celebrate that. I think that lasts through Monday, right, Dan?
It does through February 5th. So Lunar New Year or Chinese New Year started this past Sunday, the year of the rabbit. And we wanted to at least start and kick this off with a promotion that we're having. So I wanted to show that first, which is save 50% off of tokens. And we're going to talk about what you can do with tokens because we've just opened up a whole new thing with Web 4.0.
Well, and that's the thing is, 4.0 is about everybody being a participant. And I think that's what we're going to talk about today with some game theory that actually is how we got here and where the world from here is going to go next with game theory and everybody being able to play the game on a level playing field.
That's correct, Tim. And I really look forward to that. And we'll talk about your new podcast that just was released as well. But today we're going to talk about hawks, doves, and owls, which might not mean anything to anyone, but it will here soon. And then also let's first talk a little bit about what we continue to see happening in the marketplace, Tim. With big business, with layoffs, et cetera, because it really dovetails and it ties right into what we're going to talk about here today.
Well, yeah, I think that's the case, Dan. So, big business in for a rough earnings season and the tech layoffs. And you mentioned hawks, doves, and owls. And we're not just talking about nature and children's books here. We're talking about the reality of the hawks and the doves and the owls and how that plays into what is actually written in the back end of today's internet.
That's correct, Tim. And I'm going to just focus on you here for a minute because and just frame this up with everyone about your new podcast. And the podcasts are really in depth. I listened to the last one, I think twice. And Alan, if you're on, you had shared with me, you listened to it multiple times, but it is quite amazing. We're seeing a ground shift right now, and we're seeing it with layoffs. We're seeing it with big business. We're even last February, we hosted a World from Here where we talked about the Great Resignation. We talked about what was happening in the marketplace and really predicting what is happening. And that's migrating from big business to decentralization and having the opportunity. There are going to be over 600 million new jobs that are needed in the next 8 to 10 years. And fortunately, we have a way to spark that through entrepreneurialism, through decentralized work, and through Web 4.0.
Right. Well, you point that out, Dan, and I think that the fundamental thing that needs to be recognized is the big business, the biggest businesses in the world are doing massive layoffs. I think in our newsletter, which if you haven't subscribed to our newsletter, it's very well curated about what's going on in the market today. And I think in the last 3 weeks, just 40 or 50,000 people got laid off from some of the largest companies in the world. So we're not creating new jobs, we're displacing people. And that really boils down to what's going on with this technology, digital world that we have. So Great Resignation, the COVID pandemic, all those things were part of the beginning of this evolution that really you can look all the way back to how this has been codified, not in just computers, but in nature and the instincts of what I talk about in the podcast, which is the evolutionary stable strategy or game theory. Right. And this isn't new. Game theory started with this, some of the earliest dates all the way back to 1883, I believe, with the study of oligopolies through the Cournot theorem. And really what we should talk about is where people end up and where this new model of a decentralized web ends up because of game theory. I mean, it really is the natural evolution. So you can be afraid, you can run away or retreat.
Right.
And you're not going to escape the natural progression of what's happening with hawks, doves, and owls.
Yeah. So this is the part I really want to talk about because it is quite.
So I'll tell a little story, and I'm not going to give away the whole podcast because that's not what this is about. This is about the world from here is about looking at the reality of what's happening in the world, what we have developed and been, as you said, Dan, predicting and building into for decades now as this distributed computing environment emerges. And there's really, really powerful and cool stuff out there, but used improperly or used with by a centralized few, it will determine the outcome of the game. And so at the end of it, like theorists and Nobel Prize winners and mathematicians have been studying this for centuries now. And the more we understand it, the more we understand why it's important to get to Web 4.0 as fast as possible. So here it is. We have a hawk world, and we hear the hawks squawk all the time. Like constantly we're hearing these hawks squawk out there. That's what it's interesting. It fills the media. But if you have an all hawk world, what happens is hawks are very aggressive and they will fight against each other. They just will. And there will be either an injury and a retreat eventually, or a war of attrition, which is who can outlast the other one. And really, that's what we've seen in the internet so far, and in a lot of this influence in economics. We've seen it in forms of markets crashing, things like FTX happening, all of this. This is hawks. And it was all driven by that big squawking, and we're going to battle out there. And in the meanwhile, what happens is this. When the doves show up, very much like what happened with the transition as the pandemic hit, we all went to digital, and people who are just working and doing the work and trying to create this kind of harmonious ecosystem, because nothing ever happens if people don't actually work and just stop talking about it.
Right.
I always like to say in digital, in technology, in our world, nothing happens until there's fingers on the keyboard. And the brilliance of these people that do the work and don't just spend their days out there shouting about are the doves. They're the peacemakers. They're the ones who actually give us the foundation of this. Well, in a world where hawks and doves show up, it's a balancing mechanism. It's a balancing ecosystem. And it seems to be pretty stable. Yeah. It seems to be an evolutionary stable strategy. And for a while, it generally is. So in an all hawk world, we've got war, basically. In an all dove world, we've got this kind of relaxing bit of peace and calm until a hawk shows up.
Right.
Or
and would
vice
you
versa.
say, and would you say, like on the Dove side, the contract workers, a lot of gig workers, a lot of people, that are really involved in doing good things, or working for companies, et cetera, especially during COVID, when
and when there was plentiful money and there was plentiful economic supply, we seemed to have this stable, more equilibrium, stable strategy emerging, and that's game theory, and it seemed to be really, really, really fine until one of the resources was blown up, and that's called a mutant event. Right. And when these mutant events enter, we now have realized we don't have a stable strategy. We don't have a scalable strategy. And now what's happening is the hawk dove world is blowing up, and hawks are firing doves, and doves are saying, or doves are resigning still and saying, we don't care, and productivity's down, and all of that is a natural evolution that has been proven out in these theorems.
Right.
So a third category.
And Tim, a lot of feathers are flying right now.
A lot of feathers are flying. It's actually, I listened to this last night, and it's brilliant. Benedict Cumberbatch does a show on YouTube, I think is where I watch it, on YouTube. It's called Letters Live.
Okay.
And it's about and it's live letters. It's a very good show out of the UK, and it's live letters about stories where people have written in to explain something, whether it's love or whatever. And this one's about seagulls. You have to watch it. I'm not going to go into it, but it's brilliant. It's really brilliant and really well done. So it's feathers flying reminded me of that.
Yeah, so, for sure.
What happens is when a retaliatory event or a third variable. So when we're thinking about game theory, technology, math, economics, any of this kind of stuff that's affecting our lives, think about variables. And the third variable that shows up is the owl. Right. Now, when a retaliatory event or something permanent moves into the neighborhood, and it has these different characteristics than the other two variables, all of a sudden, you actually create an ESS, or what a lot of us talk about as scalable strategy. But ESS is an evolutionary stable strategy, and it balances things out. And the owl balances things out because it's not overly aggressive like a hawk, but it's a raptor. Right.
It's thoughtful, it's strategic, it thinks,
exactly. Yeah. And we can think of Web 4.0 in those terms.
Right.
We can also think about the way we want to play the game in the terms of who we are and what we do. I hate posting on social media. Most of you know that. I don't do it. I don't like to do that. I sometimes pay attention to it, but not very often. And, that's a very hawkish kind of thing to do, is get out there and have all of this opinion. But I do like to work behind the scenes and create things. And we all have these different personal intricacies about our lives, and they're all very important. Understand that none of this can happen unless all these variables coexist.
Correct.
Right.
So when we relate that back to all these things happening in the world and Web 4.0 and technology, it basically boils down to this, which is the hawks have controlled technology for 50 years. In fact, this is in the podcast. I'm giving away the whole podcast, but go listen to it.
Oh, well, no, it's in depth, though. The podcast is,
ARPANET This is the 50th anniversary of ARPANET this month.
Wow.
Right now. 50 years we've been at this and we've been building it. And it's appropriate now to see that it's time for what appeared to be an ESS, all these problems coming out, to see that OWL swoop in and say, no, let's get rid of some of these mutant strategies that are killing the environment and become part of a distributed computing environment. And we're gonna show that at blocksearch.com. We actually do show it every day on the things we're releasing. And a lot of examples can be looked at as how this actually affects everybody. And that's why we always encourage people, just get started or just take that first small step to become part of this, because you want to be part of that more stable system. It's going to happen.
Correct. And I remember maybe 4 years ago, maybe longer, when you stated to me, Dan, we're fixing the issues that the internet created.
Right.
And that's really what Web 4.0 is. And what you've accomplished here is to create a private place where it's safe and secure for everyone to do their personal things that they do, as well as their business and everything else that they're doing. And authentication, authenticity, all of those things are needed.
That's right. And what we're looking at is this idea of what control do users really have?
Right.
Right. Think about it for a moment. What control do you as a user, all those people listening out there, what control do you really have? I mean, really? Do you control your data, or do the hawks?
As I always tell my wife, we're out of control.
That's right. So in a hawk dove world, the hawks really are, you're the prey. That's why you're tracked all the time. You're the prey. You're the business asset. Look at any business model that's out there right now and see how they create, what is on the pitch deck. Right. It's how do we create the numbers from all of the people using our software? How do we create the sticky nature of people so we've got them ensnared and it's just easier to attack? It's easier to raise the prices or so forth. Like the doves have very little control, if any, right? All they can do is retreat. A dove against a hawk will lose every time.
And then would you, I'm trying to classify this because, we each kind of operate in all three of those sectors from time to time. But as far as an owl, who are individuals that, I see you as an owl, an entrepreneur, somebody who's looking towards the future, very calculated, very strategic. Who are some other owls that you can think of?
Well, the owl model is really interesting, and owls are an interesting species in and of itself. First of all, an owl, Johns Hopkins studied owls, and why can they turn their heads 270 degrees without killing themselves? We can't, right? And so they wanted to understand from brain injury or neck injuries why that is. And the owls evolved to be able to do this to protect their world, right? To protect themselves. It's an evolutionary, and this is all evolutionary. So an owl is looking around, and an owl is more the creative that then also needs to have resources with in its environment to coexist. And those resources very much balance each other out. So when you have a great idea, if you're super creative or you want to build something, it's absolutely pointless to do that by yourself, or it'll stay very small as a good idea.
Right.
So you have to get into the bigger ecosystem. And then certainly you have to get out there and let people know. So if you think about it in terms of idea, creation, and marketing, which is which? the creation and the idea and all of that is very entrepreneurial and very creative, which then has to drop down into actually the really critical stuff so that other people can take advantage or use that idea. And it doesn't matter if it's technology or art or cars or electric cars or whatever. You have to get real people in there that can implement that. And ultimately, you have to hawk it out there and market it and tell others that it exists, and the ecosystem continues.
Right, right.
The imbalance comes in when, well, a foundational model of game theory, which is talked about in the podcast as well, is the Nash equilibrium. So if you want to understand how complicated all this is, watch A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe, because that's a really good explanation, and an entertaining movie, does a brilliant job in it, of game theory and how crazy you can get at trying to figure out all these variables. But the Nash equilibrium actually ultimately said you cannot make logical, or any attempt to make any kind of decision is futile without looking at all of these different variables.
Right.
So Web 4.0 is about distributing this out and creating the variables, all of the variables, not just some app that you can put out there. And we've lived in this app-based world for a very long time, right? And creating this ecosystem that can now scale.
Right.
And that only actually works through this idea of these ideas of fundamental technologies being in everybody's hands. And the way to access that is with, believe it or not, tokens. That's right. How you actually access the first evolution of this, is with tokens. That's not what happened in Web 3.0. They were just traded as speculation. But correct. When you bring out the utility behind this, you all of a sudden bring in the out. You change the control, you change the game.
Yeah, and so Tim, I just want to pitch the podcast really quickly here, and then I want to ask you some questions about some Web 4.0 new launch activities, and just briefly cover that, because and then let's talk about the token. So Blocksearch.com/podcast is where you can go to subscribe, and you simply can go to any of your favorite streaming services, whether it's Apple or Spotify, etc. And we've got them all there. And we just posted this just yesterday late afternoon. So your podcast is there. So in depth of what Tim's talking about here, and you'll understand more about Hawks, Doves, and Owls, as well as game theory and how that all relates. And just quite fascinating to me, especially when you relate that to the marketplace and what's happening today.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, what we've created. So as we roll out each one of these pieces, our betas that you're seeing, if you're at blocksearch.com or you're on our lists, our email newsletter lists, or any of our communities, you'll start seeing these links pop up. We'll put the links down below today on domain certain. So why are domains important? And I'm so excited that we're releasing this new infrastructure based on what ARPANET did 50 years ago. A whole new domain strategy where you actually control everything on that domain, and it gets rid of all of this spoofing and all these mutant events that happen with domains. A lot of them that we saw when Bored Apes were being stolen
for sure,
like that, like these fake links and all that kind of stuff.
And Tim, really where it starts, and I'll share my screen here again, because really where it starts, and someone asked me this yesterday, how do I get started with Web 4.0? And really where it starts is with Orbit.io, which is a free download. It's a private browser, and we have an announcement today for those Apple users, correct, Tim?
Yeah, we do. The Orbit.io browser is up there in beta for Mac. I'm using it, and so sign up, put it in, and make sure you put in your email and mobile, and you'll get all of the updates for your browsers. And yeah, the browser is the container of Web 4.0. It's the thing that gives you access both, across this entire ecosystem of Web 4.0, Web 3.0, Web 2.0. It gives you full access. And that little search bar right there is the first unified search that puts authentication and information, what Google was really good and has been really good at dominating in the world and creating in the world, all in one place. So it's the beginning, kind of like Dan, I was telling you earlier, one of the examples we're going to use is how the Betamax changed the world of the video we're in, what we're doing today. But that's for another story. So
that is. So then I want to also share. So if you download Arbor.io, you'll go through a whole process. You'll be able to download your wallet and start your whole process flow. And this is what you were talking about just a second ago that we're so excited about, is protecting your own name, your domain, your brand. And we're going to talk more about this here in the future.
And behind this, and this is why we want to set the stage of what distributed computing environments are, is in order to actually control your own internet, you first have to start with a domain that does something. It's not just a name. It's when you get this, you actually get the entire ecosystem. So you actually become an owl to start out, because you can look at the entire forest that you're in and actually choose what your strategy is going to be. And it doesn't matter if you're a hawk, an owl, or a dove. It actually means that you can control this. And we're doing this for the next 30 days with just one, essentially $10 or one BCert token, $9.99. I guess that's the mental barrier. I've done a lot of reading about that. And the mental barrier. So if you can't afford $10, it's $9.99. We'll give you the penny back.
Perfect.
But it's this idea of starting with your domain name. So we didn't change. There will be changes in pricing after the next 30 days. But as we're in beta and we're testing out all of this, anybody can choose and protect a domain name with the extensions we've created. And it's beyond.com, beyond.org, beyond.net. It's beyond all that. And we're beyond a lot of things that we've been telling you right now. So we're ready to roll out a tremendous amount of power to the individuals to start this distribution model really at scale. It's evolutionary.
It to me is deja vu to 1999. I was at MCI. We were talking about rolling out .com and get your, it was a land rush to get your domain name, etc. But this is very unique because in that environment, and that's 23 years old now, hackers have figured out how to hack those things. Spoofing happens, one letter off or anything, and then you're off to the races trying to get your identity back or your bank account, other things.
And you've seen it, with the kind of high level, non-complete technologies out there, like the NFTs, for example, or the virtual land grabs or things like that. Like those are non-complete technologies. Where are they at today? Why did they crash? It wasn't a sustainable system. Right. Just very pure and simple. It was the typical owl or hawk squawking and the doves flocking in to grab that stuff. And then, we had this big boom when there was plenty of money and it crashed around itself. Whereas when you bring in the utility or the function or the actual resources and balance that out, you now have a huge value proposition that evolutionary, stable strategy takes place.
Correct. And, we're talking about, I think it was PwC that said a $1.7 trillion new marketplace with blockchain. And now we're seeing the evolution of blockchain so that it is now functional for people, for
That's right.
small businesses, for entrepreneurs, for
Well,
everyone.
it is. I will say this, and it is at blocksearch.com functional for people.
Well, that's what I'm seeing.
I don't know of any place else where blockchain is functional for people on the planet right now. I have no clue, and I'm in this business, more hours in a day and a week than I care to talk about. I have no idea where else it is.
Right.
And if it was there, I would tell you, but it's not. It has not.
Well, it's
there.
still a developer. It's a whole developer land where you have to have a lot of tech and a lot of resources to do something.
It wasn't driven by a strategy to deliver distributed computing environments to the average person.
Right.
It was developed and then captured by the hawks and driven by the hype that actually drove the development of the technology behind the scenes. If you were watching, which we were, and if you were looking at what was happening to actual software, where it was headed, if you were looking at all of the variables, you would do logically what Blocksearch did, which is build an environment that said, hey, we can actually create an evolutionary stable strategy and marketplace for distributed computing, even if we don't go jump in to the fray with all the hawks and the doves where they're playing and they think they're in a stable strategy. So that's the reality of it. Is now there are tools. There's the Be Certain wallet out there, but like anything else, you have to learn it. Go try and record something on a circa 1970s, 1980s videotape machine and see how that goes versus your phone today, right?
Right. Well, Tim, I know we've got to wrap this up. Thanks everyone for joining us. I want to just also share this again about it all starts with OrbitEye, and it also starts with the token. And
that's right.
If you saw the newsletter, a lot of great content there that was sent out yesterday. You can register for the newsletter to receive that at blocksearch.com. You can start your journey with OrbitEye at blocksearch.com. And also at token.blocksearch.com, you can start your journey with tokens, which, for 10 tokens, you can manage an entire business versus spending, $2,000, which is what it usually costs per employee to do things like Zoom and all the other DocuSign, Dropbox, all the other things that you have to spend individually for that you can access when you want it. At any time. So through a token.
And I'll point this out, Dan. I want to point this out that authentication is the OWL.
Yes.
We will talk more about the proof of authenticated work, protocols and so forth in the future. But when you go in, we are putting everybody for free. We're giving a token so you can authenticate. So as soon as somebody becomes a member of the community, we push them through to get their authentication, and that lasts a lifetime because it's on the blockchain. It's forever. Right. So it's one thing that you can do to step into Web 4.0 and start getting out of that craziness and start building whatever future you want. I use it for my family now.
Yeah. Well, and I do too. And uploading things that are important to me that I don't want to share with anybody else, or if I want to share, I can. That's where it comes down to choice and control, and eliminating the control that the big boys have, and putting that control in the hands of each and every one of us. And
of authenticated users, and that comfort of privacy is really, really important to me, and I think a lot of people out there. So that's where we're at. And there are really amazing things that we're pushing out. A lot of how-to stuff that we're working on right now, like how to really utilize this. We've built this entire organization of Blocksearch across 5 continents and somewhere around between 17 and 20 countries. I can't even count anymore, on a Web 4.0 platform and philosophy that we're now handing off to the world. So it's exciting.
Exciting. Yep. So stay tuned. We have a new one coming up in a couple weeks. And obviously, we've got a Tim's podcast you're going to want to listen to. But get started, download Orbit Eye, and stop being tracked and having your data exposed. Take control of your life and your business world. That's where it all starts. So
that's right. Thanks, everybody. And don't forget, subscribe to the newsletter as well. It's got a lot of great, fantastic curated information that really helps you get navigate through and pilot your way into this new future we're creating that's above the clouds.
It is. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Have a great weekend. And I know you always say something at the end, Tim.
Well, stay digital, stay healthy, get into your next game. It's not just a theory anymore. It's your life.